Welcome into another installment of Jake and Joshua, where we sound off on some of the biggest topics in Big Ten football. Jake Butt, Joshua Perry sitting right here. Wanted to talk about this. I put out a tweet over the weekend and said that 77 points out of Ohio State, they sent a message, and my inbox started just lighting up with people saying, it's Toledo, what kind of message do you think they sent, yada, yada, yada. And my mentality on it was this, is I've talked about how in these games we don't necessarily learn a ton about teams, but one thing you can do is put your identity on tape, right? So if you're Ohio State, you want to be a high-flying offense. It's a defense that's shown in the second half that can make adjustments and tighten up. For Michigan, going out there, playing really good offense, showing a variety of looks, new quarterback, breaking him in, defense, picking up where you left off last year. And for Ohio State's case, I don't think anybody scored 77 points in college football yet this year. So it's this idea that for some reason, it's the players or the coach's fault for how good the team across from them is, and that we can't have takeaways. Not necessarily that we don't learn anything, but we can't have takeaways from some of these softer games at the beginning of the year.
It's a great point. I think maturity is a big thing too, is the value in that from a leadership standpoint and a maturity standpoint. And what the fans don't see is the practice and preparation throughout the week. That's where the maturity shines through. Is your team approaching practice kind of lackadaisical, saying, oh, we already got this one in the bag? Are they competing and emphasizing, the same standard, unwavering standard? Meetings, same way. Is there an unwavering standard? That's going to give you confidence to say, okay, this team is mature and they're going to be able to handle any situation because they're preparing like it's a national championship, regardless of the opponent. And then on field, same thing. Are you coming out sleepwalking? Are you taking the game for granted? Yeah, you're going to play tougher teams throughout the season, especially as you get into Big Ten conference play. But certain things translate, right? Gap sound defense. Are you guys fundamentally sound, like no missed assignments? Are you getting to your spots? Are you getting there on time? Are you communicating? Is your secondary in the right place, right? Like we look at Michigan and they've been able to generate a lot of pressure. But if you turn on the film, sometimes when you're blitzing, you leave your back end vulnerable. You turn on the film, you don't see receivers running freely wide open down the field that would lead you to believe that a better offense is going to take advantage of it. Guys are in position, and then not only that, they're playing good, sound defense or offense, but then their talent takes over. So it's twofold. Same thing with JJ as a quarterback. Right? So you have completion percentage, but then you have ball placement. Okay, completion percentage is throwing an accurate, catchable pass. Ball placement translates regardless. If I'm running across the middle and you put it on my back hip and I have to slow down for it, that gap is going to close. Against better defenses, they may be able to get a hand in there. But if it's out in front of me, accurate, I don't have to break stride, I can get yards after catch. Also, as you're playing better defenses, that gap is going to close, the windows tighten. So the ball placement is even of more importance from the standpoint of completion percentage. Those things translate regardless of the opponent.
It's interesting. As you started doing like this, your eyes got real wide. You can tell he's a former tight end.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's the same thing that people get on with Minnesota too. And it's bothersome to me because that's a team that last year I think showed what the standard was, especially defensively. They've gotten better on offense, but people don't necessarily want to give them the credit for going out there and beating the opponents that they have. When you can flip on the tape and you can watch their offensive line communicating and then moving people out of the way. Like breaking tackles is more difficult against better players, but like running through tackles is hard to begin with, and you see them do that constantly. Their offense has hit a rhythm. Of course, like you said, if windows get smaller, it's harder to maybe throw the ball, but just getting in that rhythm and developing that chemistry has been big for them. For me, you'd like to see some of these teams get tested because I think as viewers, we get to learn more about them, and the teams in the locker rooms, they get to learn more about themselves. However, you can take away a lot, and you can make a statement by going out there and handling business the way that you should. The only way I learn anything out of games like these is if I watch a team who's supposed to win the game a certain way, not go out and do it. Then that's where I start asking questions so I can get the information processed. But when you go out there and you exceed expectations, you handle business the way you're supposed to, I don't see an issue with this.
You can't control who's on. I guess you can maybe, but in the moment, in the future, you can maybe control with some scheduling. But the players did it.
A lot of these coaches for some of these games weren't around.
Exactly.
When they scheduled them. So I mean, what are we going to do here? I want to turn the page real quick though. Talking about this mentality of being able to lock in and focus, especially when you're playing lower level talent. You got other factors in some of these games. We've seen it a couple of weeks in a row now. Had the weather delay up at Michigan, and then the same thing happened with Iowa. As a player, what would your mentality be going back into that locker room and then having to come back out, potentially doing that a couple of times?
It's kind of a delicate dance, right? Football is a heavy, heavy adrenaline sport. Like, you see these guys get hit. You don't really feel it in the moment of the game because your adrenaline is so high, right? You feel it after. So as you go into these, and that's a timing thing too. You want your adrenaline to be peaking right at that whistle, and you try to extend it throughout the game, and then you'll come down in the hours after the game. But a rain delay presents an interesting challenge. If it's pre-game, you're a little bit better off because you can kind of stay easy. If it's in the middle of the game, well, you don't want to come down too much to the point where you start to be sore and you start to let some of that soreness leak into your legs. So it's a bit of a dance. And then you also don't want to be too focused because that's mental energy, that you're wasting. You only have so much capacity to remain focused. So you want to say, hey, we still have to finish a game. We still have to play the game, but let's save some of our energy for the game so you can have fun and be a little bit more relaxed. Again, just as we were talking about the opponents, when you experience rain delays or anything external that's outside of your control, it then emphasizes the maturity and leadership within the locker.
It's a challenge to your team. It's basically what are we made of and how do we respond to these situations that we don't control. I believe that 100%. Now, me as a player, it's very interesting, especially now with young people and how tied in they are to these things right here. Like, as a coach, I don't think it would be a bad thing to say, okay, let the guys get on their cell phones, like unwind a little bit because of that mental energy thing that you talked about. I don't think people realize how taxing this game is on your mind. On game day, when you leave the stadium, you are spent physically and mentally. All you want to do is just give yourself a break. And so for players coming back in to be able to let their mind get away from all of the focus for just a little bit, and then being able to come together and lock back in before you go out on the football field, I think would be really important.
So you bring up a good point too about leaving the stadium because, I had a massive family. My mom's one of 16, my dad's one of 8, gigantic family. So after the games, you're mentally taxed, you're physically taxed, but you have to go and also, this is a good point, to have some grace with your athletes too when you're saying, hey, we want an autograph, hey, we want a conversation, hey, we want a picture. My own family, I would be like, guys, like,
chill out.
Hey, I converse with them. I don't get to see them too often. But I'll tell you, I'm not fully present because I'm so exhausted and so spent throughout the game. Yes, in a sense, the physical part's the easy part.
Right.
You are certainly mentally drained after those games. So I say that too to say, hey, when you're in the stadium and you're trying to get autographs from your athletes, understand what they just went through. Be a little bit graceful with them.
I'll leave with this one. It's a lot easier to put your body out of motion than it is to put your mind out of motion as an athlete. And so
I like that.
So much of this game is focused in on the physical aspect because it's a big part of it, but this mental aspect of the game too, I think, is the challenge that most of the teams have to overcome. They got the physical tools, but how do you deal with the mental side of it? Jake Butt, always good.
Always good.
Again next
Central Ohio guy.
Yeah, there it is.